Red light, green.
Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. It is 4 o'clock, and this is the regular meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners, and we have a rate hearing today also. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board and calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak, and if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. Let's do our roll call of commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm Commissioner for District 1 and President of the Board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, we kind of have a long agenda, and we have one unique item. We have a public hearing set for 5 o'clock, and the plan is for rates. And the plan is to proceed down the agenda, get as far as we can. When we get to 5 o'clock, we'll jump to the rate hearing, and then when the hearing's over, we'll pick up where we left off. And the only other thing I was going to suggest is under commissioner reports, I was going to suggest that we not do our normal commissioner reports just because it's going to be a long meeting. If we have anything urgent that we feel like we need to share or ask, we can do that. But otherwise, I was going to ask us to hold commissioner reports until next time. Is that agreeable?
Yeah, mine's short anyways.
Okay. So with that, are there any changes to the agenda, or can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Collins, seconded by Commissioner Tupper. To accept the agenda. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. The agenda is approved. Public comment. The public comment period allows members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting after initial warning by the president or the designated chair of the meeting. Individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. We have one hand up. I don't see anybody in the room. So Tom Tiersch, you are up.
It helps if you unmute. Good afternoon. I have a comment that relates not necessarily to the PUD business, but to the PUD personnel. I got a very, very nice email from Don McDaniel the other day, and announcing that he's going to be retiring and leaving the PUD. First I'd heard of it. And all I can say is you're going to be, losing a terrific resource. He's been such a fantastic source of information over the years that I've known him. And I'm sure he has served you very, very well in all of your discussions. So he's going to be very, very missed. And I just wanted to thank him for the very kind words that he said to me in his email, and wish him the very best for his future. So thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thanks for that recognition, Tom. I totally agree. And we have done a few things for Don, probably despite his protests, to recognize and appreciate him, and there's more coming. Do we have any other public comments for items not on the agenda? There's nobody in the room. Any hands online? Not seeing any. Okay, we will move on. So manager and staff reports. And before we go too far, I just wanted to verify, I got kind of a rocky start. Okay, so we do have on the rate hearing, I just wanted to look ahead and make sure we kind of have a script. So it looks like, hey, Joel, are you online there? Is there anything in addition to the rate hearing, what you've got written on the agenda that I need to read, or is that it?
Nope, that's it.
Cool. Thank you. Apologize.
Yep, no problem.
Please continue with the staff report and manager's report.
So we were going to have Gene Hall give a quick update on programs that the PUD does for our customers and bring in some information. But she could not make today's meeting.
Okay.
That was the only thing we had scheduled on manager's report because of the long meeting, so
Okay.
there won't be a manager.
If we have a bunch of people here really questioning our rate discussion and the issue of what are we doing to help the low income customers, do you feel like we have answers that we can provide at today's hearing of assistance programs? And
We can't give the same detail that Gene would have for us,
okay,
but we can answer a lot of questions.
okay, thank you. All right, so if we're Curtis, did you want to, we before the meeting, Curtis and I were talking about the NOAANET board meeting and the tech conference that happened after that. I don't know, Curtis, if you wanted to share anything more on that for the two commissioners who weren't part of that, or in case there's any questions, just briefly.
Yeah, so this past week after the regular NOAANET board meeting, they had their Tech Fest, which basically is all of the technical folks that showed up from all the different utilities. They did some demonstrations and things of the platforms that a lot of the other utilities and NOAANET is promoting, which is the Nokia platform. So I got to see a little bit of that solution called Altiplano is what they use for their management. It has a lot of the same look and feel as what Calix looks like to us. And then a lot of discussions around all the different utilities that are changing from active Ethernet for broadband services over to PON. Some using Nokia, some using Calix like we are. And the discussion is around retail, right? The move to retail and knowing that they need to move to retail and trying to navigate how they're going to do that, and conversations with us on, you know, what we're doing, how we're doing it, what systems that we're using and things of that sort. So good dialogue, good turnout, good conversations. You know, a couple of the counties like Douglas and Mason 3 are doing retail for just employees and retired employees, but that's all they've really touched on right now, and they haven't established a lot of the processes for the provisioning and billing and automating all of those processes like what we have currently done.
Okay. I had a question about, so there's all this discussion of going from active Ethernet to PON systems. When an organization like NOAANET chooses to go with a Nokia product and we're working with a Calix product, do you anticipate there'll be difficulty in our technical people talking to their technical people when we have things that are overlapping, or is it really just the nameplate on the box, the type of equipment, and it's not really that big of a...
The technology is the same, just like active Ethernet, whether it's Adtran, Adva, Sienna, or Cisco, it's the underlying technology of Ethernet is still the same. So again, back to like cars, right? Ford, Chevy, what have you. The components are still the same. It's the branding on it. There's going to be some of the technical things that what Altiplano can do versus Calix Cloud. But in even talking to other utilities across the US, I've found out that there's some utilities out there that are using mix and match of all of them. They're using Adtran, they're using Calix, and they're using Sienna. So each to their own, but technology wise, PON, XG PON, that type of stuff, same type of technology.
Okay. And the reason I brought it up is because we're using Calix and because they're using Nokia, I was hoping there wasn't going to be an additional barrier to us communicating and working with NOAANET. And it sounds like it won't create that.
I think it has more to do with just the navigation of how to get to something. It's like, well, I know how to get to this in Calix or Nokia. Where's the same type of feature or function in the platform?
Okay. Did you have a question, Dan?
Yeah, I want to hone in a little bit. I don't think any of this is proprietary. I imagine you'll tell us if it is, and that is on some background on the importance or the necessity of the second pathway. And what exactly, when you made that reference, what that is.
Yeah, so the pathway that we're looking at establishing is to avoid the incident that happened last summer, where there's fiber that got dug up near Highway 116 that is the communication off of the Olympic Peninsula So the desire has been to come up with a redundant and diversified path. But what we've been looking at with a few different outfits, specifically NOAA, is coming from this building here at Four Corners and making sure that we've got routes that are going down 19104 and across over to Seattle, and another route that's coming from here going down 20101 and back actually down to Olympia, and even farther, as Kevin and I have talked about, all the way down to Hillsborough, down by Portland, so that we get that redundant, diversified path. By chance something gets dug up in the future, that we've got a secondary path for all communications, 911, internet, all those types of things that we lost last summer.
One follow-up to that, and this is for the general manager to get ahead of the curve a little bit on this. So is this strictly a matter of connecting up connections, or is there a fees or are there costs involved with this second pathway? What's the fiscal impact of this? Is there any?
It'll be a monthly fee to get off have the new path established. We don't have those numbers yet. There will be a fee.
So is this primarily or all broadband related, or does this have anything to do with SCADA? Because our SCADA is for our system. We're talking about getting out of our area. So is this broadband related?
This would be broadband related, even though we do. So without going into a lot of detail, some of our software is cloud-based software. So if we lose our connection going down one path, we would still be able to reach the cloud going another path.
Yeah.
But there's other services that we help provide, like E911 services and cell phone tower communication that uses that same path, that is part of that same infrastructure that we take care of. So this will support that too, to try to prevent a complete outage where we go dark, cell phone towers and enhanced 911, all the things that this will help support that.
How close are we to having that second pathway operational?
Less than 30 days is my best guess here.
So knowing that does the E911. So is this for us to support knowing that, or do we intend that we can get revenue out of this second pathway? I mean, what's the overall plan of how it will be utilized by us, other than just being obviously a redundancy, a backup to get in and out of the area? Is there a revenue component to this?
No.
Okay.
But it had a fiscal impact to Noam as well as us and
Excuse me.
everybody. So I mean, basically, I see it as we're being responsible stewards of our assets, and our partners rely on us, and we're trying to work with our partners to collectively find a second path off. Is that a correct summary?
It's no different than the electrical grid. We're trying to put in the new substations, transformers, that kind of stuff. It's reliability. It's things we have to do.
But it shouldn't be a significant cost that would
No.
significantly affect the broadband budget. Okay. So commissioner reports, is there anything that's vital that folks felt like they needed to communicate or questions to ask?
I'd like to briefly talk about the PERMS board meeting.
Sure.
The most significant thing that came up was the fact that PERMS traditionally has done a 3-year look back to determine that they have in reserves the required amount under the state statutes. And what they found was that there was a shortage of $761,000. PERMS is doing an assessment for all of the member utilities. Jefferson County will have to pay an additional $71,000 for the year. Part of the reason for this is that during COVID, there was a lot, yes, and I'm speaking specifically about the Health and Welfare Fund. During COVID, there was considerably less utilization of medical services. An assumption was made that the lower utilization would continue, and that assumption proved to be incorrect. Hence, the need to make an assessment for all of the utilities, and it's based having to do with the number of our employees plus our utilization experience. And while we have an additional $71,000, our neighbors in Clallam County have over a $200,000 increase because of their utilization experience. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer that, but I thought this was something that was significant that you would need to know.
Sure, we got a bill coming, and that explains why.
So do you know off the top
You
of
got
your,
it.
you know off the top of your head, Ken, how many entities are part of that pool? Is it just PUDs or are there other entities involved in that pool?
No,
as well?
it's exclusively PUDs are part of PERMs.
And then Melanie had a comment or a question.
Commissioner Collins, is that, that figure, it's a one-time adjustment? That 71,000?
No, it's going to be, we're already being charged an increase in our monthly assessment. So it's not a hit that comes all at once, but it has to be squared up by the end of the year.
I see. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
And I have just one, I'll just briefly say we had our first EDC board meeting with our new executive director, David Baloff. Went really well, had some fairly challenging things to talk about. I'll cover that more in the future. And I think he's going to be reaching out to some of the community leaders, and including hopefully Kevin, you will have a chance to meet with him soon and get to share some thoughts on how the EDC and the PUD might interact. But I thought it was very healthy, very good. I think he's going to be a great executive director.
I guess I'll throw one thing out there. I took advantage of an offer from the port director, Aaron Berg, to take a ride on the electric ferry.
Good.
So, and there, I'm going to give a shout out. If you want to hear more about it and see what it was about, there was an article in the PDN today about that. So,
Yeah, I saw an article about that. I was bummed I couldn't go because it's an Irish company, and I read about that thing and it just sounded amazing. So I'm
I
glad
took
you
some
got to go.
video, so
Cool.
I'll let you look at the videos later on. If you
Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else on commissioner reports, we'll move ahead. So we have a consent agenda. Do we have any changes to the consent agenda, or can we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second on the consent agenda. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Consent agenda is approved. We have nothing under old business. New business, 9.1, we have an award of award of contract broadband CGNAT. Is that going to be Will?
It's gonna be Will and Curtis and
Oh, I see. It's from Curtis. Sorry, Curtis. Whoever's leading, go ahead.
Curtis has been working on this for a while. We brought it to the board because it exceeded the amount that we could approve on our own. And so Curtis will explain what it is and what we got.
Are you
Okay.
going to put it up on present?
Yeah, I can pull that up.
While Will is bringing it up, I first brought this to the board's attention in February on a current product that we have. So to meet our standards and some regulatory compliance, this is something that we need to change. It moves us towards a superior product with better performance, security features in it, and allows us to save some additional costs in the future on what's called IP version 4 address space. So that is getting very, very tight and expensive to get. So that's what this product is specifically.
Okay. And it's not a small amount, $213,000.
Is there an annual?
Yeah, is it a one-time thing? Is this hardware that'll has an expected lifespan? Could you tell us more about our investment?
Yep. So this cost here is the first initial, which includes the installation, the hardware, and the first year of support and maintenance with it. The ongoing cost is something that we can negotiate for years 2, 3, and upwards. The equipment itself designed to last 5 to 7 years, and it's two pieces of equipment so that they operate in redundant fashion, with one at Auto Street and one here at the Four Corners building, so that if indeed we have a failure, that we've got physical separation between them for that redundancy.
Okay. And does this have anything to do with the retail service we're providing, or is it just, it's applicable to the fact that we're providing broadband service, period?
Board.
Across the board. So whether we're doing retail or not, we got to do this.
Because this, CGNAT is known as carrier grade network address translation. So it allows us to have a smaller pool of those IP version 4 addresses for a bunch of subscribers, business or residential. They don't need to have a public IP address. It actually does that address translation through this device in order for us to save on the cost of IP version 4. But what this does is also adds in some security features about activities that are going on, and supports IP version 6, what we call dual stack, so that as this continues to grow out over the next 3, 5, 10 years, this is a appliance that can still support that type of change to IP version 6.
Okay. Well, you did a good job of explaining it because I basically understand it and I'm not a technical person. Any questions by commissioners on this one? Do we have any public comments on this item? I'm not seeing anybody and there's nobody in the room. So we have a recommendation to approve a motion to authorize the general manager to award and enter into an agreement with Presidio for an A10 carrier grade network address translation solution and support in the amount of $213,618.74, not including sales tax.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve this award and authorize the general manager to proceed. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Cool. The motion is passed. Thank you, Curtis and Will.
Okay, let me share my screen. Oh, they keep moving.
So the next item is the Jefferson North and Discovery Bay East fiber bid packages, or was there more on that award of contract? Are we on to the next item?
That is the next item. Yep.
The Jefferson North. Okay.
Yep.
Please continue.
Beginning. Okie doke. All right. So we are preparing to go, well, we're requesting to go out to bid for our next two fiber projects, which are Jefferson, oop, wrong one. Got too many controls here. Which are Jefferson North, which is the orange areas on the screen, and Discovery Bay East. These grants, I think we applied for these back in 2021, so it's been quite a while. Earlier this year, we went out to bid for Discovery Bay East. We were looking for one contractor to do everything. We were not able to do that. So now we're coming back. We've got all the engineering done for both projects, and we're splitting it up into two bids. One is for aerial work, which requires a pre-qualified contractor, and the other bid is for buried work. And that's all the fiber that goes underground, all the conduit, as well as all the splicing. This area, East Discovery Bay is
sorry, Will, I have a question. So the overhead and the underground, I assume that's kind of mixed in all over the place. It's not like
correct.
One area is overhead and one area is underground. So you're going to have contractors working in a couple of contractors working in the same area, doing different kinds of work for us.
There'll be multiple contractors, and even for the buried contractor, there's separate subcontractors doing the work.
Okay.
Okay, so East Discovery Bay, it's $1 million project. 70 some passings, 52 connections, 8.3 miles of fiber. We're looking to begin construction in September and finish before the end of the year. It's a relatively small project compared to what we've been working on, which is a $20 million project and 200 miles of fiber.
That's still a lot of miles for 52 connections. That's almost like Okanagan PUD kind of numbers.
It's a little bit sparse. Yeah.
It's 20,000 per passing.
Yeah, that's East Discovery Bay and Anderson Lake Road. That's the entire project right there.
Okay.
And they're not nearly as remote as some of the bead stuff, so that's.
Yeah. So Jefferson North, this is $11.4 million grant award, 646 connections. This is 100 miles of fiber. This one will take almost a full year or a little less than that, 9 months or so, awarded by the State Broadband Office. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Again, and it was probably, and I read this, but it's been a couple days now, so I forgot most of what I read. Is this mainline or is this going to be fiber to the home as well? A little more.
All the same as before. It's fiber to the home. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
mainline and fiber to the home.
it is
yeah.
mainline
Yeah,
and-
mainline and drops is what we call that. Yep.
And it's 100% paid for by the grant.
Yep. Well, we have matching funding in Jefferson North that we provide,
Okay.
and the county provided 750,000 for Jefferson North as well.
Hmm.
Okay. So the subtotal for the bid package is $7,627,869. That's without the tax. You see the tax totals at the bottom. For our engineer's estimate, that's just calculating up all the units before the tax. That's why we're listing out the pre-taxed amount this way. It's $685,878 for the aerial portion. There's much less aerial than there is buried work. It's not nearly as expensive to do. Okay. Those are the two bid packages. For the grant, the way the grants break down, Jefferson North, its total cost for construction is estimated at $8,642,000. But that also includes undergrounding the electric on Flagler Road. So we have budgeted for that project. We're going to be putting in the conduit to prepare for undergrounding all of the electric along Flagler Road, and that will be paid by the electric department. It's identified in the 4-year work plan, so it's pulled out separately. Discovery Bay East, we're at $940,000 and $211 for construction. That's a little higher than we were anticipating. I put it over to the side. So it's about 264 more for construction than we originally budgeted. The state, last time I checked, the Public Works Board office, they had additional money if you were to get bids that were over the original amount. So we're expecting we'll be able to cover that. If we can't cover that with the state money, we have that matching grant, which we have an additional funds that we can use to cover that overage. Right now, we're estimating that we'll be $799,000 under budget on the Jefferson North construction piece. We're taking that as a good sign. We spent a lot of extra work going over all of the routes because we had to do such a thorough job to bring the Olympic Fiber Corridor project into budget. We were very thorough with Jefferson North. We found a lot of areas to save money. We're hoping if it does turn out that our building costs are lower and we do have an overage, we can use that to connect additional homes beyond the 60% take rate. So we'll keep.
And when are we anticipating? So these are going to start soon.
So if the commission approves it tonight, then it would go out to bid. We'd advertise the bid tomorrow. And it's about a 2-month process before we're back out to construction. So early September.
And when do we think it will be, both these projects will be completed?
So our priority would be Discovery Bay East, and we're hoping to finish that one up by the end of the year. We think we can do that. And Jefferson North, we would finish up by the end of May.
Okay.
We need to have construction wrapped
Of
up
next year?
Yep.
Okay.
What is the deadline on those grants? Are we going to be well within the time limits or would we need
We're
extension?
aiming for end of June right now is what we have, end of the fiscal year next year.
And do
So-
the grants have a deadline to utilize the funds? I mean,
So
it's because it's been a while. I've forgotten now what. the
yeah,
terms
we've
were.
set it at summer of 2024. They have, I will have to double check, but that's what we put it from the contracts originally.
Summer 2024 or 2026?
I'm sorry, 26. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Apologize.
Okay.
Too many numbers.
Any other questions on these projects? Or did you finish your presentation or do you have more?
That's all I've got.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners?
Yeah. when are we anticipating filling the electric conduit with wire?
So Ken, part of that depends on some other projects. We don't think the electrical, it would be done in pieces. So we would do a little piece and then go away. Total is about 4 years to get the island complete, unless something comes along that drives us, for example, a grant or something like that would push us to do it quicker. But we're looking at 4 years for the electrical.
And if we underground Flagler Road, do we have any idea of how much we will save in terms of outages that will be prevented by doing that?
We will run some numbers. The dollar amounts, I don't know, but we've ran outage scenarios, so I can tie some dollars to that fairly easily, Ken, and bring it back to you. It will be,
Great.
but it's not only the dollars we save. If we usually have on these big outages a crew on Marrowstone Island for the duration. If we can fix that, it puts that crew somewhere else. It cuts down the outage time in these other places too. There's a lot of savings to work this project together.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
I have a question that generated some thought from me here on this one, on the undergrounding portion of it. So we are going to basically be doing away with the overhead, pole attachment fees, that sort of thing. And you said we're going to do it in pieces, so I know it won't be, what, 8 miles, 10 miles? I don't know how long it is. So how's that going to impact the poles that are coming out of there? Are we reusing that infrastructure somewhere else? I mean, give us a little bit of a projection of where that current overhead, how we're going to utilize, and what the revenue impacts would be.
So the overhead, we will not reuse. The wires are, you can't reuse, and per code, I can't reuse those poles. They're too old. They've been in the ground. I can't reuse them. So
So depreciation and
yeah, basically that system will be wrecked out. The poles will be pulled, taken to the yard, disposed of properly. The pole attachments go away. There's only one, well, there's 2 customers on there now, and those customers, well, on Flagler, there's only one customer, and they would have to put their attachments underground or take over the poles.
just one follow-up to that. So is that something, do we have a policy then that addresses that in particular? Because now they're paying pole attachment fee. Do we charge a fee to run them into conduit? What exactly happens when we make that transition?
So when we have an open trench, we go to them and say, okay, if you're in our trench, they pay a percentage of the dig, and they pay for their conduit and that kind of stuff. So we do have those in place, but they would be responsible for their conduit in the common trench.
So their access to service will go away because overhead poles will go away. And if they want to maintain service out there, they will have to utilize our trench and pay for a portion of it, and they'll have to pay for new equipment to go in the trench. Is that correct?
Correct. But sometimes they choose to do a project outside of ours where they would plow in their own cable.
Okay.
That's rare, but it does happen.
Is there a procedure to notify folks like that so that they're not caught by surprise? Because I imagine that could be a fairly expensive proposition.
A lot of times they're like us, they will just put the conduit in. So that part's relatively inexpensive. So they don't have a huge cost up front.
Okay. And there's no legal requirements where they have the right to keep using the overhead for some period of time. It's like a month to month rental,
It's annual, isn't it?
the attachment fee thing.
The legal question, I'm going to default to Joel. In my past, though, there's we have a good working relationship with CenturyLink. They come and they say, hey, we can't be off these poles for a year. We'd say, fine. It doesn't stop our work. We can get our stuff done.
But we'd leave the poles up for a while.
Leave the poles up. And then the last person on the pole, if it is CenturyLink, then they're responsible to pull the pole. So those agreements are a utility nationwide type.
Okay,
deal.
so you don't anticipate a problem with any of that?
No, not
Okay.
at all.
No, and that was my question, that we are going to communicate and everybody is going to understand. It's going to be piecemeal, but this is going to be the process, so everybody's not caught flat-footed. So-
Correct.
Okay. All right. So is there any other commissioner questions on this one? Is there any public comment on either of these bid proposals? Going once, going twice, not seeing any. So what I see is two separate bid proposals and two separate motions. Okay. So I'm going to read the first one. That's for the aerial. So there's a recommendation by staff to approve a motion authorizing the general manager to publish an invitation to bid for Jefferson North and Discovery Bay East aerial fiber construction project, bid number 25 BB 0803.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve the aerial fiber construction project bid. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, that one's approved. Now I got to go back to the top, grab the second one, unless somebody's got it ahead of me. I think I'm there. I got it. I think buried. Okay. Next one is staff recommends that we approve a motion authorizing the general manager to publish an invitation to bid for Jefferson North and Discovery Bay East buried fiber construction project, bid number 25 BB 0804. Was the last one 803?
Yep.
Okay, this one's 804.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of the buried fiber construction project bid, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much, Will.
Thank you all.
And
Okay.
next item, scroll down.
Next one is also fiber grant related.
Okay,
We have RUS Form 675 that designates the signees for submitting reimbursement requests for our RUS funded grant and loan project. That was our Southeast Jefferson project. But we are requesting that Mike Bailey and myself be added as signers, and it has to be approved by the board
okay,
via a motion. And then we need the board to sign it in ink.
Okay.
And then also we'll send you a digital copy to sign.
and I have a question. Right there, it says the project budget is $18.4 million.
Correct.
Wow.
And this is the one I do have questions about.
Okay,
The reconnect.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you recall, I was tentative about the Reconnect grant, and this was going to be as we progressed. So again, this was just to put them on as be able to sign, or was there another part of this where we were going to sign off on archaeological or some other?
No, RUS had to sign off on the archaeological environmentals, and that's completed.
Okay, so this is just so that you guys, staff, can sign different phases of this. So again, the point I'm going to bring up, again, no issues with the housework we have to do here to, get things tied up and be able to do business. But again, I'm still waiting to see some sort of prospectus on the revenue that we're going to be working off of to pay back a $4 million, I assume, I don't know the exact number, a $4 million loan. We obviously have a couple other loans that we're dealing with, but in the aggregate, it all adds up. This is a substantial chunk of debt, and I'm still not seeing the numbers on where we're going to be for revenue to how we're going to pay this back. That's my concern with the RUS loan. Yeah, a lot of money. I get it. We're leveraging 4 million to get another 14. I get that. But if you can't afford to do it, where does the money come from? That's the ultimate question. Where does the money come from to pay back the loan and still maintain the system, operations, and maintenance? Am I going to see something that shows that?
We're working on some things now, Dan, that will come monthly to the board. You know, we've added the board broadband things in the financials, things like that. So yes, you will start seeing as we finish up our first grant there in Gardner and Quilcene area, there will be reports that you will see on connections and how that's going, revenues coming in.
Could you remind us, so this is going to cover 100 miles of fiber passing just under 1,000 homes from Chimicum to Port Ludlow and down the Coil. Okay, so you've kind of covered the geography. Could you talk a little bit about how you anticipate attacking those areas and how much time the grant would allow us to perform on it? And if, I guess to Dan's point, if we're concerned that, say, we're not getting the signups or the revenue that we thought is there a pause point, or kind of talk about how you plan to proceed with the project and the timelines and.
Yeah,
So-
so this won't start until we finish our other projects. So
Okay.
we're gonna
Mhm.
finishing up the Olympic Fiber Corridor and the In-Betweens project this fall. To date, we have fiber to 1,200 properties. Of those properties, we've got the box on the outside of the house for about 850 properties. We've got 400 that are ready to turn on. We're just waiting to get to them. And we've got almost 300 that are already connected. So
Okay.
that revenue is just going to start increasing as we go forward. In the Gardner area, we contracted out some of the aerial work. So we can't connect anybody in there. And that's where most of our customers are until that aerial work is completed. That should be completed by mid-July and splicing will begin. Yeah.
End of July.
Mid-end of July. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're pushed back. That grant, we've got to have that one wrapped. Our Olympic Fiber Corridor grant's got to be wrapped up by November. So we're going to prioritize getting those customers first, and then the in-betweens customers will go a little bit later if we have to.
So let
So
me,
to get to Southeast
Yeah.
Jefferson, we'll begin engineering work. We finished environmentals. We need this form so that we can get reimbursed for all that environmental work that we did.
Got
Then
it.
we'll begin staking and engineering. That'll take almost another year. So as we finish up Southeast Jefferson and East Discovery Bay, and then also the Port Townsend project, those will all need to be done by next summer. Then we'll transition over to the Southeast Jefferson project.
and about how many passings do you think we will have done and connected by then?
By
Roughly.
then, we'll have 2,500 or
Okay.
so. Yeah.
So, and you've given us budgets in the past.
Yep.
You've looked ahead. You
Yep.
kind of made some estimates as to when you think we'll be, budget neutral on revenue covering costs on broadband.
Yep.
So I guess my sense of it is it's like almost like a year or two out. This will start covering costs now that
Yeah.
we're having, but in terms of wire in the ground, it's a year or two out probably. And at that point, we'll see the revenue coming in. We'll see how many passings we will have. We'll see how many of those passings are retail and how many are wholesale, and
Mhm.
we'll have a better idea of how things are going. So if suddenly we got cold feet about something.
Yeah. We've had all of our registration for the people that signed up for the fiber. We've exceeded all of the take rates for Southeast Jefferson. We've set a 65% take rate. Currently, that's at 45%, but we've done zero marketing to them because we've not known when we were going to start the project. We had to get through our US environmentals first. That took nearly a year.
Mhm.
And then we have to go through the engineering. So we'll start doing more outreach now that we know we're kind of on the way. And it was the same with the other projects. As soon as we started doing more outreach, we got more registrations.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you just saw the last two votes. I'm all for what makes sense and when the numbers can be shown. This one still concerns me. The timeline matters, and like you said, this one's going to take place after some other stuff gets done, and we're getting some feedback now, some numbers. But this one still concerns me because it's a $4 million loan that you're committing to, that we have all the best information before we have to actually 100% commit to this grant. I'm still not there yet. I need more information to show the revenue, the projections, all that. I assume it's going to work, but I don't want to sign off on something I don't have all the information on.
So I guess the question and the feedback I would give is you're asking for a motion authorizing you and Mike to sign on correspondence going back and forth with RUS to draw funds. How will you keep the board informed of what you're doing so that we're feeling comfortable with the progress?
Yeah, so Mike's including that information in the financial report. We can spend a little more time going over that during the meetings, and I'm happy to give status reports whenever the board needs them.
I guess for me, the interesting part would be when you're thinking, okay, we've finished the engineering, we're requesting a draw, those kinds of things, keeping us posted on the progress. And so that, you know, if we had questions about revenue, if we had questions about signups, we could ask them as things are going.
Well, the elephant in the room. We're going to have a rate hearing later on. The electric side's looking at a 9% and then a bunch of 7% increases year over year. Where's the money come from on the broadband side of the equation here to do this work piecemeal, you know, and in portions and as it goes? If that money's coming from the electric, our electric customers deserve to understand how and why that money is coming from electric. I think that's a question we could get asked. That's why I bring it up now, tonight, at this point, is because of the electric rates we're looking at. How much is electric going to carry the water for broadband and for how long? It needs to be shown and spelled out. What is broadband going to generate for revenue, and how does that reconcile with the cost of running that business?
Yeah, so the electric is not paying for the construction. That's being paid for by the grants and the loans and that. So, but we are being subsidized right now on the operation side until we have our full base of customers to pay. And we expected that to be 4 years to break even from when construction begins. So construction was a little slow on the start last year. I would set the clock from the beginning of this year for 4 years.
And I guess that's kind of a budget question too, when we're getting really close to budget time for next year. So when we're looking at, so I guess the broadband budget for this year, and where we are now, you say we're being broadband's being subsidized on operations a little bit. I know part of that is the property taxes
Correct.
that
Yeah.
we collect. Is that basically what you're talking about?
No, an
Okay.
additional amount, but we earn that back over time, and then we're paying overheads on the broadband as
Okay.
well. So
So I
we can
think,
go over that in another report and show that. We've gone over that with Doug Dawson.
Right.
We can.
Yeah, I just want us to be transparent.
yeah. And in the past, we have had broadband kind of shown as part of the electrical, and we hadn't fully set them apart, but we're doing that now. We're going to
We
be
do
able
the
to have that.
reporting separately, but broadband is still a department of electric. So, and it still shares resources. And in fact, for the Olympic Fiber Corridor and in between project, the grant is paying the lineman's time to do all of the fiber work that was constructed. So we're getting quite a bit back. We're getting new poles. We're getting all kinds of things from the that benefit the electric.
No, and I understand there's synergies and there's trade-offs and that sort of thing. So again, I'm not arguing any of that. I just want to make sure that we're being transparent, and that we are tracking things in a way that the public can understand. I need to understand it, but the
Yeah.
public needs to understand it as well.
Yep.
Ken, have your hand up?
I do. So what are the terms for the RUS loan? How long do we have to pay it back, and approximately what's the interest rate?
So the interest rate is the, what is it? The federal
Prime,
It's yeah,
Treasury.
the prime treasury, which I don't know what it is right now.
4% maybe?
Something like, it's been between 4 and 5 for the last couple of years.
Is Mike online, or is he?
He's not available.
Okay.
We're not going to be,
It could change too.
and it will change likely in the next couple of years. We probably won't be drawing from that loan, and it doesn't start accruing interest until we do draw from it for another year to 2 years.
Mhm.
We received a grant from the state to replace part of the loan. So we spend the state grant money first, then we spend the loan money, then we spend the federal grant money. So we have 4 million to work through from the state to begin with. So we won't be drawing any loan dollars until possibly 2027.
Okay.
And how long do we have to pay it back?
I think it's a 20-year loan, but I have to verify with Mike.
Okay,
Well, just a start of a flow timeline type of a chart that by year and progress, just something like that, even though it won't be complete or may not be 100% accurate, something to give us an idea.
Yeah, and
You know,
those were all
what we're
included in
looking
our
at.
business plans, but we can update them based on current projections.
And does the interest rate get locked in at the time we draw the money for the 20-year span?
Well, I have to look, but I think it's per draw. So
Okay.
I'm
Per draw, then, okay, this amount of money for 20 years at this interest. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep.
All right, commissioners, any other questions? Public,
No.
any questions on this one? Don't see any hands going once, going twice. So we have a recommendation to approve a motion authorizing signature of RUS Form 675 Certificate of Authority, identifying Finance Director Mike Bailey and Broadband and Communications Director Will O'Donnell as the parties authorized to request funds on behalf of Jefferson PUD.
So moved.
second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
aye,
Aye.
Aye. So you are authorized and you've got something for us to sign.
I do. Yep. After the meeting.
Okay, and then we'll have to get it to Ken somehow, or Ken
I
to
will-
the form
I
somehow.
will figure out a way to get it to Ken.
Okay, and then again, yeah, I think just keep doing what you're doing, which is keeping us informed. And again, as we go through the budget, it'll give us a chance to ask more questions
Sure
too.
thing. Yep.
Okay. Next item, and we're still a little time shy. We got 9 minutes before 5 o'clock. Do commissioners want to break, like a 5-minute break before the hearing? Sure.
yes.
Okay. Let's see what's up next, and we can at least get,
It is.
okay,
Oh, that's, I got the
let's,
old agenda.
let's go to that and we can at least get started on it and maybe finish it. Who knows? Who would like to
So
go?
I'll start this one off. As everyone's aware, we've been working on this Eagle Ridge project for a long time now. We had a June construction date. We went out to bid based on the drawings from HDR. Engineers estimates, and these are rough numbers, was 240,000. The only bidder came in at 340,000, which was over the allowed amount that we can award the contract, which means we would have to go out to bid again for the project. That will add, as Will just said, another 2 months to the project to bring it to the board, to get it advertised. So because of that and the need to get this project done as soon as the summer peak gets on mid-July, we've talked to legal counsel. And we are recommending that the board does an emergency resolution so that we can purchase materials starting tomorrow, negotiate with a contractor starting tomorrow, and hopefully get this project done as quick in July as we can. The problem with the area that we have is we're putting in booster pumps. The booster pumps will make it so they have adequate pressure throughout the summer, and it will alleviate some of the air problems that they've had in the past. And the summers, their peak usage, and it's our least amount of water in the tanks. So
Okay.
that is the emergency.
Okay. Commissioner questions on this one? No?
So.
I'll just,
okay, go
I just
ahead.
wanted to say that this is, we've had significant testimony and comments from the neighbors up there. This is, I think it's fair to say this has taken longer for us than we had hoped to get both the engineering solution and the environmental review done. And it's disappointing that the bid went the way it did, but I think this is a critical situation that we need to address, and I support this resolution.
So I'll make the motion that the PUD general manager is authorized to contract outside work and materials under RCW 54.04.070 and the PUD's procurement policies.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second in support of the resolution. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
aye,
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Thank you, commissioners.
And thanks for your good work on this, Jose. And please keep the neighbors informed as we go forward. Okay, let's go ahead and take our 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 5 o'clock for our public hearing on the rates.
You want to adjourn this meeting?
We're not adjourning, we're taking a 5-minute break. So pause the recording. Oh, well, wait a minute.
Adjourn the regular meeting and then come.
Joel?
No,
Anyway, no,
no.
this is part of the same meeting. It's
it's
just we
all part of the same.
go
We
into a
didn't,
public
we didn't
hearing.
advertise it separately as a
Yeah,
separate
with
meeting.
one meeting. So just pause it and we'll. Okay, it is 5 o'clock. This is Jeff Randall, Commissioner of the Board for Jefferson Public Utility District. We have completed the items for our regular meeting, so that part of the meeting has been completed. We are now proceeding to the rate hearing. It is 5 o'clock. And we'll start by calling ourselves back to order. So are all the, actually, sorry, get my script going right here. So to start with, Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So we'll have a roll call of commissioners again. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm Commissioner for District 1 and President of the Board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, we're all here, present and accounted for. And again, the purpose of this part of our meeting, this is our hearing on considering new electricity rates for the next 4 years. And we're going to have a presentation by our consultant, and then we will have a public comment period, and then we will proceed on to commissioner discussion and deliberation. So if you're a member of the public and you're tuned in, please hold your comments until the public comment period. Commissioners, we might have some questions clarifying. Will, oh, you're not waving to us, sorry. And if you see anybody who needs in, the front door is locked now, so we need to let them in if we have anybody approach. Please hold your questions to the public comment period or comments, and commissioners, if you have clarifying questions, usually the presenter will let us ask them. So let us go ahead if we have our presenter ready.
Paul, I'm just gonna thank you and FCS real quick. This is the second rate study they've done for us. They've worked with staff. Hopefully, we've worked well with them, but we really appreciate all the hard work they've done. Paul is presenting today, and just thank him and his team for everything they've done for the PUD. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate your time and being here tonight to present to you all. Let me get my screen shared. And we'll start the presentation. Okay, well, again, my name is Paul Quinn. I'm the project manager on this rate study update, and I'm here to discuss the electric utility cost of service rate study update. Quick agenda before we get going. We're going to go through a background, what meetings have we had so far? How have we got to where we are today? I wanted to touch on the rate setting process. It's more of a learning tool. What are the different steps we take when we think about a rate study? Then we're going to spend the bulk of the time going through the different analyses we performed for the electric utility before kicking it back to the board. So in terms of a background, the last rate study we performed for the electric utility was completed in 2021. We began this study update at the end of 2023 with the first presentation to the board in January of 2024. That presentation was really reflected around the pole attachment fees and just a quick refresher on the steps, the rate study fundamentals. We didn't actually come to the board and present findings for the electric utility until November of 2024. Since that November meeting, we've had several follow-up meetings with the board to discuss updated findings. We've incorporated direction we received from the board We've updated findings for best or the latest available information. Staff has done a really good job of looking at the capital improvement plan for the electric utility and seeing if there's any projects we can shift or delay, taking a look at the RUS borrowing timeframe and seeing how that lines up with our capital program. So we've had several meetings where we've reiterated the analysis, we've reiterated scenarios, and that has kind of taken us through the latest meeting where we presented a couple weeks ago in June. The study findings, the updated scenario, and went through the different analyses. So I'm here to discuss tonight the proposed findings and the path forward for the electric utility. In terms of the rate setting process, we generally like to think of a rate study in 3 steps. The first step is the revenue requirement. That determines the overall revenue needs for a utility. In other words, how much or how big of a rate adjustment is needed in order to cover all our operating expenses, debt service, and fund the capital program. Once we determine that overall number, we move on to step 2, the cost of service analysis. That is the equity piece of the puzzle. So we allocate each component of the revenue requirement to our different customer classes. There are really 2 outcomes we're looking for at this step. The first outcome is the overall cost of service findings. So how much does it cost us to serve our different customer classes? And we can then compare that against how we're currently collecting revenue to see if there's any misalignments or mismatches between those numbers. And number 2, we determine the actual cost-based unit costs. So if you wanted to be truly 100% cost-based, how much should we be charging from a fixed perspective per month? How much should we be charging on the energy side? And how much should we be charging on a per kilowatt basis on the demand side? When we get through the step 2, we move on to the final step, which is the rate design step that takes into account the results from both step 1 and 2, and we actually design the rates that we're going to assess to our constituents. So now I'm going to go through the results for the electric utility. We're going to go through those 3 steps, starting with the revenue requirement. Again, the revenue requirement, we're determining the overall revenue needs for the utility. What is the proposed rate adjustment that we're seeing for the electric utility? This table here, I'm showing you a few different pieces of information. So that top line annual increase, that is the proposed system-wide increase over the next 4 years. We have a 9% overall increase in 2025, followed by 6.75% increases thereafter through 2028. In order to make sure we're balancing or funding the entire capital plan with these rate increases, we are proposing some new debt coming in. It would be one issuance from RUS, but we would be drawing that down over 3 years. So the total proposed new debt would be about $39 million. That would help fund the 68.6 million capital plan projects over the 4-year period. The last 2 rows on the table shows us our projected ending fund balances against our combined reserve targets. And so what I want you to take away here is under these proposed increases and with these proposed debt drawdowns, we would be a little bit deficient against our 2 reserve targets in 25, 26, and 27. But by 2028, we would be able to meet our combined targets without the help of that $5 million line of credit. So it is important to note that I'm not showing us needing to use that line of credit for the electric utility or to meet the reserve targets. The other piece of information in this table is an average residential bill, assuming 1,000 kilowatt hours of monthly usage. Currently, that would come up with about $133 in terms of the monthly bill total. With the proposed adjustments, a typical residential bill would see anywhere from about a $10 increase per month to a $12 increase per month going forward. Now, it is important to note that these proposed bill impacts do not reflect the cost of service proposed phase-in or the proposed rate design changes for the residential customers. This is strictly just looking at kind of across the board changes. We are looking at kind of different proposals on the cost of service and rate design steps. So I will come back and show you the bill impacts for a residential customer once we take into those steps into account. So again, revenue requirement determines the overall need. We're looking at 9% this year, followed by 6 3/4. We can move on to step 2 then and determine the equity piece of the puzzle. So when we think about the cost of service, we take all the different expense line items of the revenue requirement, and ultimately we're allocating them to our different customer groups. You can see at the bottom of this table, I'm showing you the different customer groups that were evaluated. When we think about the cost of service analysis, the true 100% cost-based target is this 100% solid black line here. Now that is a continuously moving target. Why does this target move? Each year, the way our customers use the system can change. Our cost proportionality may change. The actual makeup of our expenses can change. A good example of that is our power procurement expenses from the Bonneville Power Administration. They are renegotiating the contract with us starting in 2028. So the way they actually assess us charges, the methodology they assess us charges could change slightly depending on their final outcomes. And that's a good example of how costs can shift in the future and how it can impact the cost of service target and how that can shift on a year-to-year basis. So when we think about the cost of service target, what we're trying to do is get our customer groups within a plus or minus 10% range of that true cost of service target, because it can be moving on a year-to-year basis. The plus or minus 10% range is represented by the dashed black lines in this chart. And so the key takeaways from the overall cost of service findings is that our residential and general service customers, so the majority of our customer base, is within that range of reasonableness of plus or minus 10%. Some of our other customers are demand-based general service customers. There, we are collecting a little bit more revenue than what it costs us to serve them currently. And on the flip side, for our irrigation and interruptible schools customers, we are collecting less revenue than what it costs us to serve them currently. So there are some misalignments we've seen. We saw pretty similar results looking back at the 2021 study. We did make some small changes. And so what we're proposing to do with these results is to gradually change the way we're assessing rates to our customers so that over time we can get all of our different customer groups within that range of reasonableness of plus or minus 10%. This table here is the proposed phase-in over the next 4 years. In other words, the percentages you're seeing by customer group here are the proposed overall revenue adjustments we are proposing by class. So the system average is 9%, followed by 6 3/4. But from a customer group perspective, that overall revenue adjustment is going to be slightly different. If a customer class, we're not collecting enough revenue for that customer group, we're going to increase them a little bit higher than the system average so we can gradually phase them into that range of reasonableness. If we're collecting more revenue than what it costs us to serve them, we're proposing to adjust their revenue goals a little less than the system average, again, to gradually phase in everyone towards that cost of service goal. So to highlight residential, in 2025, we're proposing a 9% overall revenue adjustment for residential equal to the system average. Thereafter, they would see a slightly higher adjustment than the system average. The demand-based general service customers, since we are collecting a little bit more revenue than what it costs us to serve them, we are proposing to increase them a little bit less than the overall adjustment. So 8 3/4 in 25, followed by 3.5% thereafter, instead of 6 3/4 on the system average. For the irrigation and interruptible schools customers, we know that they need to be paying a little bit more. So their proposed revenue adjustments would be a little bit higher than the system average. Now, it's important to note that this phase-in strategy doesn't get everyone to that range of reasonableness by 2028. Again, this is a very gradual proposal, so we're going to be chipping away at that goal, and we'll be getting there over time. It will be important that at the next rate study update, that this is revisited to make sure that we're still on track and making progress towards that range of reasonableness goal. So that was step 2, right? So we've gone through the two out of the 3 steps. The last step is the rate design, where we take into account steps 1 and 2, and we actually start to design the proposed rates themselves. So the top table on this slide here represents the current charges by customer group. We have our monthly basic charges in that first column. We have the energy charges, the dollar per kilowatt hour in the middle. On the residential side, there's 3 tiers. Everyone else is assessed a uniform rate. And then if applicable, we have the demand charges assessed on a kilowatt basis for some of our larger customer groups. The second table there represents the cost-based unit cost. So as I mentioned before, in the cost of service analysis, the second goal of that analysis is to determine the cost-based unit cost for the system. So in other words, if we wanted to be truly cost-based, how much should we be charging from a fixed monthly perspective? How much should we be charging on the energy side? How much should we be charging on the demand side? Now that can help us act as a goal or a goal post when we actually start designing rates. And so when we think about the proposed rates that I'm going to show you over the next couple slides, one of the goals is to continue to align our rate structures with the cost-based unit cost, particularly on the basic charge side. So you're going to see that as we go through there. The other major goal we've performed in this rate design analysis is to eliminate the residential 3rd tier and to move back to a 2-tier structure. So the next couple slides are going to be impacts by customer group. We're going to start with residential here. As I mentioned previously, we're trying to transition some of our rates, particularly the basic charge, towards those cost-based unit costs. And we're also going to be proposing to eliminate the 3rd tier for the residential group. So if you look at that top table, the basic charge, we are proposing a $5 increase in 2025, followed by $3 increases per year thereafter. The energy charges would make up the difference in order to collect the overall revenue goals for the class. As I also mentioned, we're proposing to eliminate the 3rd tier. Currently, you have a 3rd tier that kicks in above 1,600 kilowatt hours. We are proposing to eliminate that, go back to a 2-block structure. So the 1st tier would continue to be through 600 kilowatt hours, but the 2nd tier would cover all usage above 600 kilowatt hours per month. The bottom 2 tables on this slide, I'm showing you some bill impacts at different usage levels. For the residential class, there are some distinct changes about how those customers use energy over the course of the year. So what I wanted to show you is some different averages at different time points during the year. The orange shaded row represents the residential summer average. The green shade represents an annual monthly average, and that blue shade represents the winter peak monthly average consumption. So taking into account those 3 different colored rows, the proposed rate design for the residential class would result in monthly increases of anywhere from about $7.40 to $22, depending on which year we're looking at and depending on which time period of the year we are looking at for the residential class. Moving on to general service. Same goal here. We're trying to transition the basic charge towards the cost-based unit cost. So about a $5.50 increase in 25, followed by $3.50 increases thereafter. Energy charge would make up the difference to hit the overall revenue goal for the customer group. Just like the residential customer, there are distinct usage patterns depending on the type or the time of the year that we're looking at. So we have the orange shade, the summer average. We have the green shade, the annual monthly average, and then the blue shade as the winter peak monthly average. So under these proposed rate design changes, a general service customer would see a monthly increase to their bill anywhere between about $13 per month to about $25 per month, depending on which year we're looking at and which time period of the year we are looking at. Moving on to some of our larger customers, starting with the small demand general service class. these are the customers who have a demand charge. So they're also being assessed $1 per kilowatt charge in addition to an energy and a basic charge. You can see the proposed rates in that top table for the class and some bill impacts for the group in the tables below. Now, unlike residential and the general service customers, there's not necessarily distinct usage patterns depending on the time of year. There could be for certain customers, but for certain customers, they don't have as big of an effect, or the weather patterns don't have as big of an effect on consumption. So I'm just showing you kind of the average, the annual monthly average for the class here. Looking at that annual monthly average, a typical customer would see a monthly increase between $100 to $240 per month for a typical bill. For the large demand general service class, similar talking points compared to the small demand. You know, there aren't many distinct changes depending on the time of the year for the class. Again, there could be depending on the customer we're looking at, but overall, the usage is more uniform over the course of the year. So looking at the class as a whole on average, that green shaded bar is indicating that the monthly increase would be anywhere from about $600 to about $1,400, depending on which year we're looking at. And it's the same story for our primary general service customers, where usage is more uniform over the course of the year. I am showing you a bigger range here. We have a lot of different customers in these bigger general service classes. Some of them don't use as much energy. Some of them use quite a bit of energy per month. So that range, 5,000 kilowatt hours per month up to 300,000 kilowatt hours per month, that covers, you know, most of the bills that that class will see over the course of the year. On average, at that 75,000 kilowatt hours per month, a customer would see an increase between $400 or $900 per month, depending on the year. I'm showing you the irrigation class. This is a very small class of service. There's only a handful of customers here. We're trying to transition the basic charge towards that cost-based unit cost. So we're increasing it by about $11 per month or per year over the next 4 years. Since there's so few customers in this group, there isn't really a good average to show. Instead, I'm showing you the range of bills, anywhere from 100 kilowatt hours during the irrigation season to up to 5,000 kilowatt hours, just based on the billing data we have. The range of impacts would just be dependent on the usage levels. Again, there's so few customers in this group, it didn't really make sense to show an average. Next, the interruptible primary schools. Here, just like residential and general service, you do see distinct usage patterns depending on if school's in session or if it's a heating month during the winter. So I'm bringing back the summer, annual, and winter peak monthly averages here. For the primary school customers, we are under the proposed rate adjustments. They would see a monthly increase between $460 per month up to $1,600 per month. Again, depending on the year we're looking at and depending on the time of the year that we are looking at for those customers. Before I move on, I just wanted to summarize all the different rates. So starting with those monthly basic charges, showing you the existing charges in that first column for all our different customer groups and what we are proposing over the next 4 years. Looking at residential, we are proposing that $5 increase to that basic monthly charge in 2025, followed by $3 increases each year thereafter. On the energy side, the biggest change here is proposing to eliminate the third tier for the residential customers, going back to a 2-tier system. And then you can see kind of the existing and some of the proposed energy rates for the different classes. And if applicable, if a customer group is assessed a demand charge, what are we currently charging them, and what are we proposing to charge them over the next 4 years? Before we wrap up, I did want to show you a brief rate survey. Now, we always stress that this is very apples and oranges. Every utility is unique. We have unique geographical footprints. We have different usage patterns. We have different types of customers. We don't know how, Others are maintaining the system relative to how we think about maintaining the system. Others could be in the middle of looking at rate increases. Maybe they really need a big one, maybe not. I mean, there's a whole lot of factors that that kind of create a more of a murky comparison, but it is a important metric to compare ourselves against some of our neighbors and PSE. And so right now, under the existing rates, a typical bill for a residential customer of about $133 stacks up pretty much in the middle compared with, again, some of your neighbors and PSE. And so that really wraps it up for the presentation. Again, for the electric utility, we've performed the rate study. There's 3 main steps. We have the revenue requirement. What is the overall system adjustment that we're proposing? That's that 9% in 25, followed by 6 3/4 each year through 2029. Step 2 is the cost of service analysis. So looking at what it actually costs us to serve different customer groups and how are we currently collecting revenue. That the outcome of that is developing a proposed phase-in for each one of our customer groups. And then step 3, what are the actual proposed rate schedules that we are looking going forward? In terms of next steps, we are looking at electric time of use rates and a meter reading opt-out fee on the electric side. And we also are looking into the water and sewer and broadband utility revenue requirements, which will come at a later date. So at this time, I'd like to conclude my presentation and kick it back to the board.
Thank you, Paul. So this is really, I think, the 3rd time we've kind of had a look at this, and we asked a lot of questions last time. So I guess at this point, before we get into discussion, are there any questions?
One quick question. I know there was some discussion at the last meeting about the kilowatt hour breakdown of 600 being the breaking point. Did we want to see anything else of that going higher to 700 or 800? Was there some discussion about that?
Yes, we felt at this time we would go with the 600, but in a year from now, we would come back with an 800 proposal. Sounds reasonable, but we just don't have enough time to do all the research.
So we're gonna address it moving forward. We're gonna do a review each year. It sounds like is the plan. And we'll address it then. Okay. No, just curious. I thought that there was some discussion about that and I couldn't remember what we had talked about.
There was, and it sounds like that's where staff looked at it and that's their recommendation right now. Okay. Ken, do you have any questions at this time?
Yeah, going forward, I would like to see a fair amount of data related to the electric time of use rates and how that can best be applied to conserve electricity and get the maximum benefit of having bidirectional meters.
So we had some discussion about possible time of use rates, and do we have an estimate when they'll come back to us with that at this point?
I would say, depending on their schedule, I would hope maybe even the 1st of August.
Okay.
I doubt we'd have it ready in July because we want to bring not only time of use, but the opt-out rate. There's a couple other small things that we want to bring to the board.
Okay.
So on the time of use, again, for some context to how staff's going to approach this and what they're going to do with FCS to look at it, what's staff's opinion of the priority? Is this about balancing load? Is this about conservation? I mean, I know it's an all of the above. I get that. We want to do as much as we can. But what will the priority and the first go at this be? Will it be to balance load to help us maintain peaks? I mean, that to me, that seems like should be the priority, not trying to save someone because they, want to get a break on their power bill by doing something at a different time. I don't know that that's my take on how we should be approaching this.
We want to shave our peaks. We want to take and move some usage outside our peak window. And I believe we are in a great position where if we shave our peaks, it will eliminate a lot of the voltage issues we're having. eliminate some of the upgrades we have to do. Time frame, we're still gonna have to do them, but could postpone it 5, 6 years. So it is to move peak usage down.
It's not, I'm gonna say it this bluntly, it's not, second place comes in, an incentive to conserve should be second on the list. That's the way I look at this.
It does have a conserve aspect to it, which is a good thing, but for operationally, we really need it to move our peak.
I just want to know going into it, how you and FCS, how staff and FCS are going to approach this, bottom up or top down, however you want to look at it, however you want to phrase it. To me, that should be the priority is trying to balance our loads and watch our peaks and not some sort of incentive program, right? We can find ways to incentivize probably in other ways, just by informing people and educating people. So.
And it sounds like we'll be able to talk more about that when they come back. Okay. The purpose, the goals, and then of course, how you structure your rates depends upon what your goals are. And then you're kind of estimating what will the behavior be if we adopt these new rates. So, okay, lots of stuff to discuss. Okay. Any more questions by commissioners at this point? Not seeing any. So I'm going to move to the public comment section. The public comment period allows members of the public to comment, limited to 3 minutes each on any item not specifically listed on the agenda. Okay. So we cut and pasted that, but what this public comment period, maybe I'm in the wrong section. Hang on a second. No, I'm in the right section. So this is a public comment period for comments on the public hearing on the rate study. So I'm going to try and ad lib this and make it right. The public comment period allows members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each to this issue, which is the public electric or the electricity rates. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president,
Or the chair.
and are not, recognized by the president, and members of the public are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After initial warning by the president or the designated chair of the meeting, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. Okay, so if there's any questions on the public comment, please ask, but you basically 3 minutes each on this proposed rate hearing. And I can't see all the people up there. Could we shift the screen?
Paul, can you stop the share?
Sure.
We may ask you to come back and show a slide, but for now, yeah, stop the share. So are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the proposed rate changes that staff and the consultants has brought to us? If so, please raise your hand or press the star buttons as I indicated. I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, Tom Tiersch, you are up first. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Since this is a hearing, for the record, Tom Tiersch, resident of Jefferson County. The good presentation, we've seen it before. The one question that comes to mind is if you refer to slide 9 and those around there, where you list the various categories, the various service categories, residential, general service, and so on and so forth. What's missing from there, from all of those slides, is an indication of what portion of the PUD's revenue is derived from each of those categories. So when you make a 200% change to the irrigation rate, what does that mean in dollars? It's like, if it's a couple of customers, okay, fine. It looks like a huge change, but it's not. So I think that information of, what's the relative impact of each rate category, I think that would be useful to know. Whether it would change the equation or the decision, probably not, but it would provide some transparency, some additional visibility into how these rates are structured. And yes, I agree with the objective of trying to get everybody back to paying 100% of the cost of providing their particular service. The other thing, for example, on slide 13 and so forth, where all of these rate increases are shown year by year by year, and the difference from one year to the next is what appears in the chart. So it might be $10 a month more between 25 and 26 or whatever. The problem is that those are year over year, and they don't really show the customer, oh, this is going to be the cumulative effect of these increases, because by the time you add them up to 2028, you're talking about a really massive increase, 30% ish increase in cost to the customer. And, that's a very large increase considering that inflation is currently pretty well under control. And in fact, we are likely headed into a recession toward the end of this year. It's going to be very painful. I don't know that there's anything you can do about it, but it is, going to be very, very painful for a lot of folks. Lastly, on the time of use thing, thanks for moving that up. Appreciate hearing about it in August. That's going to be a breath of fresh air. Unfortunately, I don't have my meter upgraded yet, but when that happens, that would be nice to know. So the sooner you can move ahead on that, the better, and build that into the rates. And also, again, this is going to be annually reconsidered. So next year we'll get to talk about 600, 800 as a threshold level. So thanks for all that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I'm surprised we haven't got Tom a new meter yet. I thought we had all the meters changed out. We still have a few to go.
I thought Tom's was changed out, but I don't know.
You should have everything done, but we'll check in with Tom to see what the issue is.
Okay. Thank you for those comments, Tom. Okay, next item is that Roger Risley. 246. Phone number.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
You have 3 minutes. We can hear you.
Thank you. First thing I wanted to talk about was our tie ratio. Nobody's talked about it at all in this process, and I thought it bears some scrutiny. I call it the tie ratio, not the tier ratio, because the tier ratio is something different. The tier ratio is if you take how much bad news you get around rate setting time, divided by the good news, you get your crocodile tier ratio. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of around rate setting time. Getting back to the tie ratio, it's up to 8.5, and that's excessively high. It only needs to be at 2.5. And we were promised a long time ago that it was going down and not up. I'd asked at a rate policy hearing if we were going to set an upper limit for the target for the tie ratio, and I was told that it was going down. I was promised that it was going down. It has not gone down. So what is a high ratio trying to tell us? It's more than 3 times what it needs to be. It means we're flush with cash. And it means we're probably pretty front-loaded on our cost recovery curve. That is, I think we're recovering a lot of costs for things that we haven't incurred yet, costs we haven't incurred yet. I think it means we're over collecting. And I think the number is telling us that we need to stabilize our rates. That is in our financial policy. Rates need to be stable. And with a tie ratio like that, I'm sure we could not raise rates for a year and see if we could get it to go down. I think that would be an interesting experiment. The ratio, people say it's not important. I think it is. It was the staff tried to unreport it, stop reporting it many years ago, and maybe because it was too transparent, the commissioners were able to reinstate the reporting of the ratio. And I think it's showing us that we're doing very well and that we don't need a rate increase. Next thing I wanted to talk about was the third tier.
And you're almost at 3 minutes, Roger, so if you could try and wrap up.
I'm trying to testify at a hearing. This isn't a comment period. Excuse me. The third tier is we're getting rid of the third tier in order to help the people that aren't they're struggling to pay their bills, and the third tier isn't helping with conservation. It isn't reducing our peak load. I think we should keep the third tier, and when the temperature gets below 25 degrees, just drop it. That would be a good experiment in variable rates, especially coming up to time of use rates. And I think that that would tend to solve the problem. Increasing our monthly rate doesn't do the people that are struggling to pay their bills any good. In fact, I think it has bad social outcomes because you're increasing the per unit cost for people that can only afford to use a little electricity, and you're reducing the per unit cost for people who can afford to use a lot of electricity. I think that's a problem. I think it's unfair. The monthly fee, besides that, I think it's a junk fee that we really need to try and get rid of. If you look at slide number 23, and you see how little the base rate is for a regulated utility, PSC, that's the only one there that's under the WUTC. They don't get a lot of money for monthly fees because the purpose of regulation is to prevent PUDs from obtaining monopoly revenue at the expense of their customers.
Hey, Raj, we did announce at the beginning that there would be a 3-minute time period for everybody. So I'm going to ask you to stop. And if we have more time, we can come back. We've got other folks with their hands up. Did you get most of your comment out?
I got 2 out of 3.
Okay. Well, we'll come back.
This is a hearing, right?
It is a hearing, but we did establish 3 minutes initially, and the commissioners can grant additional time at our discretion. And if we don't have too many folks, we can come back and give you some more time to go. Mr. Lusk, let's give you 3 minutes and go.
Thank you. And I first wanted to thank Commissioner Tupper for his comments about the gifting of public funds issue that might be considered by the electric utility subsidizing broadband. And as I remember from February, the ask was for 400,000, which definitely would have a great impact. But that's a separate issue. What I'd really like to comment on is during the 2021 proceedings, it was developed that the fixed fee, the composite fee that Bonneville charges, that is part of the fixed charge that is going to be increased. It's an important part that the utility cover those costs, okay, with an appropriate rate structure, because Bonneville is no longer an electric utility in the concept that they're selling kilowatt hours or kilowatts of demand. They're essentially a cellular phone company where they're selling system attributes. Those attributes are your contract demand quantity and your load shaping, basically the KW and the KWH that you pay for. And each utility is different. Each public utility is different. And as I'm recalling, it could be in the 60% range. That is a composite charge that is essential part of the utility bill that the PUD gets, which needs to be covered by the appropriately rate structured fixed charge going to the customer. Now, there's a concern that, you know, a higher basic charge might impede conservation, but what FCS Group has done with the phased approach ensures that conservation will occur. It may not be the maximum amount that would occur otherwise, but there will still be an effort, okay, to conserve electricity through a higher fixed charge on the customer's bill. And the important thing is that Bonneville's rates are going to be highly variable in the future because their system has been subject to 3 consecutive years where they have not been able to generate sufficient energy from the federal power system, including the Columbia generating system, to supply their customer demand. Okay, they are not able to meet their obligation, which means they're going to the market to cover their losses with tier 2 power, which, as we all appreciate, has gotten dreadfully expensive. The PUD is in a bad situation. You know, you have to upgrade your equipment to keep the lights on, and you have to charge customers because you have to pay your bills to stay solvent. These are difficult times, and it's a balancing act. There's no correct answer in public policy. It's balancing, you know, the optimal solution that can be had where neither party can benefit. Okay, it's Pareto optimum in economic theory, but neither party, okay, can be made better off without making the other person worse off. So essentially, you know, it's a bilateral monopoly. And once again, what FCS Group and Mr. Quinn have done, you know, with Sergey, especially, is established a financial glide path for the future. And I would endorse, okay, the rate structure as it is. And once again, those are my comments, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Phil. Do we have anyone else? And we'll come back to folks who didn't quite get to finish their comments the first time. We don't have anybody in the room. Is there anybody else who has not had a chance to comment yet who would like to comment? I'm not seeing anybody, so I'm going to circle back to Roger. Roger, thank you. And please continue your comment. We'll give you another 3 minutes.
Am I still unmuted?
You are. We can hear you.
I want to compliment Phil on his excellent presentation. The last thing I wanted to talk about was our class cost of service allocation formula. It's not understandable how they reach that range of reasonableness, and it's not transparent either, and it's it's theoretical. There's no real data on that. We have only 20 large demand customers, and it wouldn't take that much effort to go back and find out how much it actually costs us to provide electricity to them, but we don't do that. And I say it's theoretical because when it comes to cost causation in actuality, there is no cost causation principle. To give you for an example, our boatyard improvements item in our budget. Why are we paying for boatyard improvements? Because the port's too big to pay? Because we don't follow the cost causation principle, except in theory? Another good example is Port Ludlow. I mentioned this last time. We're going to spend over $1 million providing Port Ludlow with power. Where's the cost causation principle there? Another one, the Navy. The Navy needs we need a whole new transmission bay to keep power to the Navy. Are they paying for it? Where's the cost causation there? I think it costs a lot more to have our large customers than it does our small customers. My neighbor's power went out the other day, and it was because it was just drizzling, and there was just too much vegetation on the line. And how many of these little residential outages are caused by poor tree maintenance? I think if our tree maintenance was better, we'd see less residential outages, and I think that there would be less cost of service on the part of the residents. Also, the non-coincident loads, time of use is a high time is many hours over the day because residential loads are non-coincident, and with regard to capacity, there's shared capacity there. A large customer with a continuous load, there's no shared capacity. I think that's another mitigating factor too. And the third one is billable kilowatts. The larger customers have more billable kilowatts. That should keep the cost down, but that's not cost causation, that's revenue causation. I'm trying to come up with reasons why we charge our larger customers so much less. The only metric I can think of to test this, of course, is revenue causation. And I've said this before, our general customers, large demand general customers, use 30% of our power but only provide 15% of the revenue. Our residential customers use 54% of the power but provide 63% of the revenue. That's a $4.5 million subsidy. I know you've heard this before, but since the last time I said that, that subsidy's gone up by $500,000. At what point does that become undue discrimination? How much price shifting can the public stand? I think that we need
Roger,
to
you're
lean
at-
a little harder. I think we need to lean a little harder on our too big to pay customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. And I gave you another 4 minutes. And you can also send comments to us in writing, but I want to come back to, I think that's all the comments we had.
I would send comments in writing, but you don't publish them. So what's
We-
the use?
We actually have a records list now that we do have on we don't print them out fully, but we have links to them.
My point exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to come back to some of the questions that came up. If anybody else has a comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any other raised hands. So one of the questions brought up was the percentage of revenue each customer class contributes. And Roger threw out some numbers. I'm not sure if he's right on the mark or not, but do we have, Paul or staff, do you have numbers where you can say the residential customer class is contributing about X percent? Is that something that's available?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, residential class is contributing about 70 to 75% of your total annual rate revenue. I have the figures for the other classes as well, if you'd like them.
If you can just throw them out quick.
Sure. General service, it's around 13%. Small demand general service, 6%. Large demand general service, about 3.5%. Primary general service, about 3%. Irrigation, it's about 0.1%. It's very small. Interruptible schools, it's about 1%. And then our lighting customers, about 0.5%.
Okay. And it's good to know that you have that data, that if we are interested in the future, we can get it. So Roger was actually low on the residential. It's 70 to 75, not 63. Then I had a question.
So how big a subsidy is that?
Okay, Roger, you're out of order. Please don't jump in. Tier ratio, which Roger brought up. I had a question. Do the grants that come in, do they affect our tier ratio?
They're why our tier ratio is so high.
They show as revenue.
They show as revenue.
Transitory.
So my thought and concern on that one, it's not just the tier ratio, which has gone up. Roger's correct, but it's gone down a little bit lately. The other one is cash reserves, and the cash reserves got dangerously low. The last couple of years got down to around 3-4 million, and now we're at what?
This week we were at roughly $10 million.
Unrestricted, yeah.
Restricted, but we've worked extremely hard, staff and everyone, to get those revenues up. We moved projects around. We need these rate increases.
And it seems like our target for unrestricted cash reserves is closer to like 15 to 18 million. I remember one time period we actually were there. I remember that a while back.
Well, on that same note, what about depreciation? Does depreciation play into that? Because
Depreciation, very rough numbers, is running about 5.5, 6 million. But our depreciation is increasing because our plant's increasing.
And that's an expense, so it affects the tier
and
ratio.
that was one of the reasons I asked about the undergrounding on Maristone. That's going to escalate. We're going to have more depreciation because things are going to go offline earlier than they would have ordinarily.
Throwing this out there, I don't have enough information, probably shouldn't say it, but we're at end of life on some of those poles, stuff like that, so.
And then another issue that came up was the boatyard project. I know a lot of that is going to be funded by the public infrastructure funds, which is not ratepayer funds. Approximately how much money is the PUD investing that's not PIF funded for the boatyard project?
So, rough numbers, we're getting half PIF funding, half PUD funding.
And the total cost of the project to the PUD?
Rough number is $1 million.
So about 500,000 in PIF. And okay. And again, that one's complicated Yes, the boatyard is taking advantage to expand. They're paying for that. We had a conflict with the trees, which we have a responsibility to safely and reliably provide power down there. And we had a hazard with tall masts and trees, and it's an expensive fix. So
What was the overhead as well, right? Weren't we doing two things there? We were doing away with some of the overhead for the safety reasons.
right. And trees, yep.
So it's kind of
exactly.
two separate projects though, isn't
It's
it?
yeah, the boatyard expansion is a separate project. It's enabled by this. And then lastly, the Port Ludlow plan unit development, or whatever you want to call it. Roger has told me a couple of times that there are restrictions in their original, I don't know if you'd call it covenants or conditional approval by the county, that they're supposed to pay any costs that occur for their development is supposed to be paid for by them. And I think his point is we're making improvements to our grid to allow continued growth in the Port Ludlow resort area that's covered by that original planned unit approval by the county. Kevin or Joel, have we ever researched this, or have we ever evaluated this issue, and what do we know about it?
We have researched it. We charge Port Ludlow like we do everyone else for a line extension. They pay for that. With the new capacity fees, they're paying for those. Even, and this came up in, I think, into 13, maybe 14. We spent a lot of time researching it, and we're doing what we are required by law to do. And we don't do it for free for them.
Right.
So we've got a few minutes left. I move that the board approve resolution revising, updating, and making certain changes to the PUD electric rates.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Were you done?
Let's go ahead and get a second.
Okay,
and
I'll
then
second.
I'll thank you for that. And I will finish my question. I wasn't quite my point on that was, are we, the things you're saying, Kevin, is what we do to anybody. It's what any development has to do. Are there special conditions attached to the Port Ludlow Resort that allows and or requires them to pay for their own impacts above and beyond what everybody else pays? And I guess you said you researched it. We researched it. Did we find anything?
I was told that it's a misunderstanding on what Roger's reading and how it actually applies to the PUD.
That we don't have the authority to collect other costs beyond what we're doing. Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Tom, you've got your hand up again. Can you please state the nature of what your comment or question is?
I just wanted to take advantage of the opportunity, it's a little second opportunity, just to point out what I believe Roger is referring to with Port Ludlow, RCW 3670A 360, which says capital facilities, utilities, and services may be provided to a master plan resort, including municipalities and by special purpose districts, provided that all costs associated with service extensions and capacity increases directly attributable to the master plan resort are fully borne by the resort. So I think there is a case to be made there that Port Ludlow should be paying quite a bit more than just the average customer. So that's all. Wanted to throw that in for information.
Thank you both for that. Okay.
And I want to call the question.
Understood. I was going to go right there. So we have a motion and a second on the table to, can you restate it? I'm trying to find if there's we have a resolution. So we have a motion and a second for the resolution of Jefferson County revising, updating, and approving certain changes to the PUD electrical charges. Any further comments or by the board? Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have approved the rates. And I will just say that there were statements made about how cumulatively over time these will have an impact. I agree. I hope as we go forward that things change and we don't need to implement these 6.75 and 7% increases down the road, that we will have a chance to revisit them. And if we don't need to implement the full rate increases, I hope we don't have to, because they are very heavy. And I'll leave it at that. I want to thank everybody for their testimony. We have completed our action under this public hearing. The public hearing is now closed. And we are, oh, Kevin?
I do want to thank the commission. Rates are always a hard topic. They're tough to get approved. But these are needed, and it's gonna make the utility much more reliant. It's really, the reliability will increase, so thank the board for taking this step.
Okay. All right. It is 6 p.m. We have reached the end of our business, and the regular board meeting and the public hearing are now over, and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.